Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first episode of Voices of Stuy, of the Stuy Podcast. We're joined by Mr. Eric Ferencz. Not so loud, not so loud.
I want to destroy their earbuds.
Mr. Eric Ferencz is an English teacher. So, please introduce yourself.
Hello.
That was the most soothing thing I've ever heard.
Okay, and
new ASMR video.
And this is hosted by me, Aaron,
Me, Cheyenne,
John,
and Alan's, of course,
MVP,
our sound
as
guy.
always.
our sound guy. Okay, so first off, John, what was your intro question you wanted?
Oh, okay. We're gonna throw you right into the deep end. We're gonna ask you extremely controversial, quick fire
philosophical
questions.
question.
Yes. If you get this wrong, the entire school will hate you. Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1, start. Hot dogs or hamburgers?
Hamburgers.
Oreos, cream then cookie or whole?
I don't even know how to answer that.
Like, how would you, if I give you an Oreo right now, how are you going to eat it?
I don't like sweets.
Ooh. I think that was the worst possible choice.
Yeah, you can.
No. All right, next question.
Was that the wrong answer?
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Yes. Pineapples on pizza, yes or no? Yes.
Yeah. I'd mess with that.
Okay. And last one, favorite Disney movie?
Probably Aladdin.
Can I add one in?
Good choice.
Favorite Pixar movie?
I don't know. I don't know the difference.
No, I
No.
can definitely.
Amateur.
I'm probably Toy Story.
I would say it's either Toy Story or Nemo for me.
I mean, I
Is
go
Nemo-
Monsters Inc.
I'm a Nemo
Monsters.
guy.
Inc. Oh, there's so many good ones.
That was a good one.
Okay, so
That was the end of the quick
Now
fire round.
that,
Pretty short.
okay,
That was intense.
Our listeners will
So-
let you know.
So,
how
Mr.
you
Friends.
did.
Okay,
There's
I'm
a
sorry.
riot you can expect.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
Mr.
we
Friends,
don't
can
have
you
any listeners.
explain a little bit about yourself and how you are as a teacher to the people who might not have had you?
What are you? I think, no, because, you're talking about maybe teaching philosophy and, what is my teaching philosophy? And I think if you ask any teacher that, they should be able to answer that question. But a lot of my thing is stoking curiosity, getting people genuinely interested in what it is that we're doing, creating an environment where people feel safe and comfortable to share their ideas. I know that a lot of students are coming from classrooms where they don't want to say anything because there's that fear of sounding stupid or wrong, and I really try to wean my students off of that mentality, this place where we can reach some sort of collective truth or collective understanding of a text and have a deeper appreciation that it's not about I got to get these assignments done. It's about I read this book and I feel a little bit more connected to humanity.
Yeah.
I guess that's part of I've noticed that you're always in a good mood. Like you're never like on an off day. You never have a bad day because a lot of teachers are nice and everything, but every once in a while they have a bad day and they don't really want to talk to kids. They don't really want to do anything. But I've only had you for a semester, but at the same time, I've never seen you have a bad day, and I just want to know how you do it.
You should see me ninth period.
Good to know.
I'm a morning person also. I really enjoy, I like to get in early. I like to be in the school when nobody's around. I like to set up. But I also love my job. And so a lot of it is having those interactions. And I think if I'm effective and, this is my 11th year teaching, so I'm getting more confident in my craft and I feel like I know what I'm doing. And as a result, I'm able to achieve the goals that I want to in the classroom. And that feels good. It feels good to work with people and get that response from them, get that interest. I also am very fortunate to work in a school where I come from a department that has a really great reputation. I think a lot of students expect to have these kind of cool, holistic experiences in their English classes. And so if I can be a part of that, it feels great,
Yeah.
Would you say that your English students were engaged right from the get-go, as soon as you stepped in and became a teacher, or did that take time to develop?
It took a lot of time. One of the cool things about teaching is, that I like about teaching is you can mess up over and over again, but it's part of a process of what someone might call failing upward. Mm-hmm. You're constantly retooling and revising and trying to make sure that you can fashion lessons for students that will meet their interest. Any little thing that you can do to make it better. When I first came in, I definitely felt like I could win over my students with enthusiasm and excitement, but the craft wasn't still there yet. There were still some things that I needed to work on and improve upon. I'm also very fortunate that, my boss, Mr. Grossman, he really helps work with me and helps show me how to improve my craft on a regular basis. And it's really cool to have that kind of support.
And was Stuyvesant the first school you taught at?
Second.
Second? What was the first?
First one was a school called Norman Thomas. It's actually closed now.
What happened?
Essentially, this was a really tough school. This was a school where, academically, students were struggling a lot. Students from low-income families, students who, very high at risk when it came to academics. We had a 50% graduation rate. We had a 50% attendance rate. We had metal detectors, which was awful. It just put kids in such terrible moods to get swiped down every morning just for having a cell phone or something like that. As a result of the school not succeeding, they started to close it down. And DOE's got this policy that when you're of least seniority, you're the first one to go. So when that school started closing down, that's when I was let go. Luckily,
Where was it? In New York?
this was on Park and 33rd.
Oh.
Yeah, but it mainly served students from Washington Heights, which is a hell of a commute too to put a kid through anyway.
Yeah.
It was not a recipe for success.
Speaking of like failing upwards, right? What did you learn from teaching at Norman Downs?
A lot of classroom management. I was doing things that were so very different from what you might see at Stuyvesant. A lot of it was getting kids to come into class on time, getting kids to have a routine of taking out a notebook, quieting down, getting started on the activity. It would take 15 minutes to get a class started.
So,
Very rudimentary skills. And so you can imagine the culture shock when I came here. And I'm thinking, okay, well, the first 10 minutes, that'll be for settling down the class and getting them ready. And then you walk in the classroom and every kid's sitting there with their notebook open looking at you.
yeah.
And you're like, oh, God, I need to prepare a lot more.
Yeah.
Well, I guess something interesting is that whenever I have an English class, I mean, every single English class I've been in, it really is about getting to participate in the conversation. And it's like, I don't know, every teacher I've had has tried to get the students to talk and get the students to talk in the conversation with the teacher, with the class. And it's really different from other subjects because I guess different subjects don't really talk as much. And like my physics class, my teacher's having a hard time getting kids to participate. My math class, kids don't participate. But like cold calling is something I guess is kind of really helpful within the English department because it helps students stay on track and it really helps the students, I guess, do the work and be able to talk to others in like an environment where it's usually like you stay strict to the curriculum and stay strict to just talking about the class, I guess.
Yeah, and going back to like cold calling, I think you do that really well, Mr. Ferencz.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you'll say something very engaging, and then immediately you'll say like, "Oh, Brittany, go! Like, what do you think about it?" Or like, "John, what do you think?" I think like did you always do that? Was it something you learned along the way? How do you think it affects the classroom?
One thing I learned when I got here is essentially this idea that you're talking about, that kids are not necessarily going to open up as much. And so what can I do to help people open up in a way that makes people feel supported and safe? And so there are techniques that you develop. I'll read something over somebody's shoulder and tell them that's a good idea. I'm going to call on you. And it might seem like it's cold calling, but I'm setting them up to succeed in that sense. Or I'll ask questions that don't have a right or wrong answer. And it's really just, how are you reacting to this as a human being? And there's no wrong way to answer that question. And so one of the really profound victories that I get to see over the course of a year is the student who did not open up at all, just beginning to participate a little bit more on their own volition, not me calling on them, but them putting their hand up. And it's really exciting to see that, because in a way that's a person telling themselves, my voice matters, my voice counts, and you get to see that growth and confidence, and it's cool to be a part of it.
Speaking of students, there's students within class have like a different outwards appearance or a different impression to, I guess, when they would be outside with their friends or just hanging out, I guess, with their family or whatnot. But I was thinking, I don't try to do that. I try to keep myself as real as possible. But on the other hand, I just wanted to know, like, do you notice when a kid is not like their true self within class, or
Or are they playing like?
are they playing
somebody trying to like play
an act?
character or
Yeah.
something like that.
Go
Or
ahead.
if someone has like more to offer, but they're just maybe shy.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard, because how do you measure that? You know?
Yeah, it's hard.
And sometimes, you know, you catch people in the halls and you get to see a little bit of them opening up in different kinds of ways. I tend to find that if I present an air of authenticity, that students tend to try to match that to some capacity. But unfortunately, there are students that no matter how hard you try, they just don't necessarily want to open up to you directly.
Yeah.
And I have to totally respect that. You know, that's it's almost as though it would be deeply uncomfortable for that student if I kept pushing or trying to make something work that wasn't happening, you know. And don't get me wrong, if a student talks in the context of a group discussion, that's great. But when I ask students to just talk to each other, like that's communication. That's them opening up. You know, it's hard for me to see, because I really only do see students mostly through that lens of them being in my classroom. So I understand that everyone has different hats that they wear. Do my students know you are wearing a hat? That's
Yes.
true. I mean,
I've seen peg
I think
legs.
about who I am outside of school and students not knowing that particular identity as well. You know, there's only so much that we can show to different people in different contexts.
How much would you say you would distance yourself, like that outside self, from the teaching self? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Like, how much of your outside activities would you like?
Or do you know where to draw the line
Yeah,
between?
like, yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, a lot of it just, you know, personal life stuff, not interested in talking about with my students. You know, I do feel comfortable sharing little details about my life with students, because I feel that does help make me feel a little bit more authentic, and I'm
Yeah.
letting you get to know me in the hopes of maybe that'll help you open up to some capacity. But I don't know, it's an abstract idea, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not interested in talking about my dating life or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's not...
No, there's
Yeah,
a.
that's not the question we have.
No.
All right. Well, kind of like making a turn. We wanted to ask you, how were you like in high school, and maybe the experiences you had in English class. If you had a certain teacher that really influenced you in high school or in college.
Wait, could
Don't
you,
reveal
could you tell
too
us where
much.
you went to high school?
Oh yeah.
I went to high school in New Jersey. West Orange, New Jersey was a private Jewish day school.
No, New Jersey.
Yeah, New Jersey. Be careful.
No.
We're gonna have to draw a line.
Yeah.
No, no.
How many students went to that
quarantined.
school?
Graduating class was 52.
What?
So
Students?
very small classes.
Whoa.
You know, it was also kind of a dual curriculum where half of what it was traditional American education, and then the other half was, I guess, Jewish-related classes. You know, learning how to speak Hebrew, Judaic law, Jewish history. Yeah, just a lot of that. I hated it. I really hated it. I just wanted to go to public school so badly.
Oh, it was a private school.
Yeah, it was private
Okay.
school. And so, I mean, you know, you can hear the privilege in my voice. But I was super quiet. You know, I was not a particularly confident person. You know, I was always very interested in making people laugh. And
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of that comes out in my teaching style. But I don't know. It was a period of time where I was really going through that process of understanding myself and finding myself. And I don't really think that I found my voice until I got to college.
It's really like something, I don't know. I've tended to notice that like people who laugh the most, like talk, like try to joke around the most, usually like even though they have this really outside persona that's really fun and like, I don't know, enthusiastic, they end up having like the most to share and the most to, I guess, hold back, I guess.
Yeah.
I come from a funny family, and there's a lot of value in making people laugh. And so you always want to put yourself in that kind of situation. I think it also serves as a really great coping mechanism. But so, I was the guy making good jokes in high school, but somebody else would take my jokes and say them.
Would you have had a meme page? If you
God. I mean, whatever was popular at the time. I don't know.
Definitely would have.
And you talked about college. Where'd you go to college?
University of Maryland, College Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why'd you choose Maryland?
I applied to 4 colleges. 2 of them were in New Jersey, so I wasn't going to go to those.
Good call.
I applied to McGill in Montreal. And at my school, you had to send out your application through a college advisor. And something went wrong, and my application to McGill never went out. So it's basically process of elimination.
Why only 4?
I was not the most academically motivated person in high school. I was, and I've seen this type of student in Stuyvesant. I thought that I was smart, but I did not want to prove it by doing work.
I know what that means.
And I did not understand the correlation of being smart is not just feeling that you have a natural intelligence, but it's also grinding it out and doing the work that you need to do to succeed.
Yeah, it's not just grades on paper.
That's
Absolutely.
I think even inside that's what separates the good students from like the great students, like
like students that are able to share, be able to have like a social conversation, or like be able to express themselves, but like at the same time they get good grades and they're able to do everything and they have these lives that are great. But like there's also students that have like, I don't know, 99s in their classes, but they just go home and they just study and they don't really do anything.
You're talking about that triangle, right? It's
the triangle. It's good grades, friends, and I think sleep is the third one.
And you can only have 2 out of the 3, right?
Yeah.
I don't like believing that, but it turns out to be true. Like
I think if you can manage your time right and you know how to properly do like everything, at a point you could get all 3. It's not you sacrifice one for the other. Like they all exist for a reason. Someone will have all of those. It's just you have to like know how to do it. And I guess most people just really don't.
Yeah.
And I don't.
Do you think
it takes a lot of discipline?
Do you think developing those skills like right now is as important? Like,
I think
like
that being able, this is going to sound myopic, but I think that being able to execute a task soundly and on time is one of the most important skills that a person can learn how to do. And I didn't have that in high school. I did not have the capacity to understand that. I didn't take pride in my work necessarily. I essentially, I have an older sister who was never great academically. And so I, as the younger sibling, could just kind of coast because at least I was doing better than her. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't necessarily understood what it takes. But also, and I see this a lot in some of the freshmen that come here, you do really well in middle school and you just have this natural assumption like, oh, I'm bright, I don't have to study for exams. And then you have to study for exams. And there's this cognitive dissonance. Like, why is this happening? Never studied before. I don't have to study. I'm not that kind of person.
Yeah. Then it hits you that everybody was you in middle school.
Absolutely.
And it's just a whole other game.
I tell my freshmen, I tell them that 90% of you can't be in the top 10%.
Right.
That's a good one.
We should check the math on that one first.
Yeah. So, like, I'm getting the impression that going into college, you weren't maybe undecided on what you wanted to do in life.
Oh, yeah.
When did that change? that maybe you wanted to go into English or into teaching? Like,
So from the time that I was maybe 18, I was unknowingly starting on a path of becoming a teacher. My aspirations in life, in high school and in college, were that I never wanted to work. And that's not sustainable.
yeah.
Take notes.
You know, my mom was a speech pathologist at a special ed high school in Staten Island. And so when I earned 6 college credits, I became what's known as a paraprofessional. I was an aide to a different student every single day, and I would work summers and I would work vacations and things like that. At my school, I was employed at my school's writing center, where I would help people with their writing. I eventually went on to TA a bunch of classes, do some writing center conventions and things to that degree. I was studying English the entire time, but I was taking very specific steps towards becoming a teacher. After I graduated, I had no plans whatsoever. Maybe I'll take the GREs and go to graduate school. One of my friends was studying business, and he was thinking about learning Mandarin, thinking that this would be the next big thing. You know, we're talking 2006, so
Yeah.
let's go. He was going basically to Beijing for the year to teach English, and it's very interesting. You don't have to have any qualifications whatsoever outside of having a college degree. In fact, me being American and being a white guy was viewed as an asset because it would bring some kind of like renown to the university that I was working at. So I accepted, and I spent the year in China teaching English.
Wow.
Yeah.
Something my parents always tell me is that if you don't end up doing well in like America, you could always just get a degree here and kind of just wave
Live like a
myself
king
back
there.
onto, get myself back into Burma and then get like a bunch of money there and just
Yeah.
live the life there. But
But-
it just really ends up, and when you go to those countries, it's just you can speak English well, and are you an American? And that really does get you a lot in those countries,
Yeah.
and it's quite odd.
Yeah.
Well, there is this strong need and this strong desire to learn English, and it is viewed as this really great money-making opportunity. And so apparently a lot of people make that decision and then go over there. And I mean, it was an amazing experience. I had a really, really great time, but it was also incredibly isolating. I don't speak Mandarin. My tones are terrible. I mean, I could and to be honest, after a while, I was in this town called Yanjiao, which was about 40 miles outside of Beijing. I had my friend, I had a couple other teachers that we were working with, but it was very alienating.
Yeah.
I would go and shoot some hoops and play basketball, and people would crowd around to watch because they'd never met a white person before, and it was strange to be subjected to that kind of gaze, in a sense. And I mean, there's weirdly enough dozens of people in China who have pictures with me.
You're in like 50 family albums.
And,
On the walls.
yeah. and it was funny and it was cool, and then it wasn't, and I wanted to go home, and I did.
Yeah, it's.
What'd you do when you got home?
What I did when I got home is I got an apartment on the Upper East Side. It was essentially it was a closet.
Oh.
It was
studio?
tiny. I got it with a
Okay.
friend.
Yeah.
And I started picking up work again as a paraprofessional. I was able to get a full-time job, which was important because I wanted medical benefits in Tottenville High School. So let's do some New York geography for a second.
Okay.
I was traveling from the Upper East Side to Tottenville High School, which is at the very bottom of Staten Island.
Wow.
So, hour 45-minute commute both ways.
Oh,
I did that for maybe 6 weeks.
like 3.5 hours of your day.
Oh yeah,
At least the ferry had nice views.
I like
though.
the ferry ride a lot. Actually, that was the nicest part. But it was very disenchanting. 23 years old. I'm living in New York City. and spending that much of my time to make very little money. I heard from a friend to apply to this program called New York City Teaching Fellows, which basically, once I got in, just put me right into the classroom, and I was earning my master's degree as I was teaching. So not only was I earning a nominal salary, but I was working towards getting a master's degree. And that's when I started Norman Thomas. So,
Well, everyone's got to start from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
best thing I ever did. Free masters, you know. AmeriCorps gave me $10,000 so I could survive a little bit in the city, but you know, I cut my teeth. I learned how to control a classroom, and it set me up for coming here.
Did you ever, along the way, just wonder, like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
You're like, just...
Still do. You know?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, because it's just this crazy journey, and I think that we have this impression that when you pick a job or when you pick an occupation, that it's a series of very calculated steps. And I've got these charts and graphs, and I know exactly what I'm going to do, but it's just the direction of where I went and what happened. And I'm so fortunate that I ended up here, and I'm happy to be here. But there are moments where I'm in front of a classroom and I'm looking around, and I've got 30 some odd people looking at me and trusting me, and it's like, what is going on?
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Yeah, I want to jump off that. How was your, with like the 30 students, how was your very first class at Stuyvesant? Very first day.
So I remember my
remember
very
it?
first class was, this is not the demo that got me the job, right? This is when I had the
This
job.
is when,
You
not
had the
before,
job.
after you're a student teacher,
Okay.
I've done like the first official.
Yeah. I was teaching American literature, and
Wait, to like freshmen?
Juniors.
Juniors, okay.
And it's funny, this is the first lesson, but this is also maybe like the first 2 weeks as well. I had this impression of Stuyvesant in my mind of high academics and these is like college level stuff that I got to be teaching my students. So when they said American literature, I was like, okay, what did I study when it came to American literature in college? So I'm pulling out slave narratives and early texts from the 16th century, 17th century.
1600.
Thank you. and you know, Anne Bradstreet and Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, and just all this things that I was like, oh, these are essential things that you need to study for American literature. And it was just the driest, most boring garbage. And my students were not having it. I mean, they were as sweet as possible, and you're the new teacher, and we're trying to help you out. And I think it must have been the 5th class where I just sat down and I said, guys, this isn't working. Like, what can I do? How can I make this interesting? How can I be better at this? And it was a moment of frustration, but it was also a really powerful moment, because I think that's when I first let myself be vulnerable, and my students really opened up and talked about what worked for them in other classes and what they were interested in. And from that moment on, things began to gradually improve, because I started to get a little bit more of what was going to make things work. And to be honest, like, listening to my students has been so incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
So many teachers have this idea in their mind of, I'm the teacher, I establish what it is, I feed it to you, but there's got to be that dialogue back and forth. And when you begin to understand what it is that your students are interested in, that's how you win. That's how you get to victory.
I think that's really, if a teacher ever really opened up to a class like that, if I were in a situation like that, and I really admire the teacher for that. Like,
Yeah.
it takes a lot to be a teacher and really be like, I'm having a hard time. I don't know what's happening. I need your help. And it's not an easy thing to do, because as a teacher, kids look up to you. They think you know everything. They want you to tell them what to do. Well, they don't want you to tell them what to do, but like
guide.
You're the guide, and you're set to take care of them for the day. And when someone like a teacher opens up to you and they say, help me, it really hits, because it shows that they care about you. It shows that they care about what they're doing, and it shows that they really need your help, and they want to have this connection with you, I guess. And I guess that really helped you out, because here you are today. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That also just yielded such a powerful experience with the students that I had that year, because a lot of it was just growing alongside each other, and it was cool to see that. You know, I learned a lot from that class, and it's really dictated a lot of who I am today, I believe.
Do you still remember the people?
Faces more than names. I had a very frustrating experience a couple of years ago where a student came in, and I had the student the year before, and he was so excited to see me, and he's like, "You remember my name, right?" Which is the worst question you could ever ask a person.
You always got to skirt around that.
Well, but we share the same first name, and that's why it was frustrating. He's also an Eric, and so I should have known that. It was the most obvious thing in the world. But I also I'm very fortunate in that when I write recommendations for students, or at the end of a semester, students will write me notes, and I keep all of them. And if I'm ever having like a really bad day, I'll just take those out and look through them. And that's a good way to just remember your students and keep your students in mind. But I mean, I've been here, I think 6 years, maybe 7. And if I'm having, close to maybe 300, you know, that's we're getting to thousands of faces at this point.
Wow.
You ever just think about that? It's
crazy.
Just if you look out into like an audience, like it fill up 2,000 seats. Or
Not the whole Stuyvesant Theater.
The whole Stuyvesant Theater just full of people.
And imagine the papers per semester, 5 papers per semester.
That's what I was thinking of. I've thought more about the numbers of papers as opposed to the students that I've taught. But now that you're bringing that up, I am kind of having this like, whoa moment.
Yeah. Oh, and you could ask.
You talk about like a teacher can have like lots of influence on you, right? Like those 2,000 kids, like even though you might not remember them exactly, I guarantee you they'll all like remember, oh, I had a Mr. Ferencz in high school, and he was like so and so, and he acted so and so ways. Like, who are the teachers who influenced you to turn into the teacher that you are today?
So, freshman year of high school, I had a teacher. His name was Dr. Jonathan Baker. And it's frustrating because I've tried to look him up, because I feel like one of the coolest things I could do is to contact the English teacher that really left an impact on me and let him know, like, hey, I'm an English teacher at a pretty damn good high school. And I haven't been able to get in touch with him because, unfortunately, like, he has a very common name. He was a Marine. Mm-hmm. And the idea of this Marine who taught literature, you know? There's stereotypes about literature, and it's perceived as this soft science, but it was just very, very interesting and cool to me that you could have this guy who just exuded masculinity, but then was also willing to have this deep interest in getting in touch with his emotional side, trying to understand humanity and the emotional experience of being a part of that. 2 things I really remember about him was when he taught us Julius Caesar, and I do not like Shakespeare, but the way that he just performed Shakespeare, he performed Mark Antony after Antony has lied to the conspirators about what his intentions were, and he then has this moment with Caesar's dead body, and he's filled with rage and anger, and Dr. Baker performed that for us and just was terrifying and screaming and really acting the hell out of the part. And it was so cool to see someone lose themselves in that. That, like, to see an adult nerd out like that and not care what anyone thought, it was revelatory, because it just made you realize, like, oh, like, I can do that too. I can really dive into something and throw myself into it, even if I might look a little stupid, and produce something really awesome and inspiring. He also turned me on to Kurt Vonnegut. which is not someone who I read a lot of anymore, but was a very important author to me as a high school student.
I was about to jump into that. Like, what are your Julius Caesar books? Like, what are those books that you lose yourself in when you're teaching? Or
Like, what's your favorite book?
You know, it's interesting when it comes to that, because I think the best way to consider that question, because it's a question I think about a lot, is really the books that are important to a person at different points of their life.
Yeah.
You know, high school, it was Vonnegut. For college, for me, it was Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway writes these very male characters who feel very deep emotions but don't express them very well. And that just reminded me of my experience and my experience with my father in particular. And so I really enjoyed that. I came to learn that that's not the most healthy way to express your feelings, but so I kind of moved away from that. I would say most recently, there's a very weird thing that happens when you enter your 30s as a man, particularly a man who lives in New York City, which is you just get very interested in reading nonfiction and history. It's a weird phenomenon that I've seen a lot of my friends go through. So I've really read some very, very fascinating books in the past year or so about the rise of Al-Qaeda and leading up to 9/11. I've read this really great book about the Israelis and the Egyptians working together to reach some sort of compromise in the Middle East. Any kind of New Yorker article or anything like that I find to be particularly interesting. But as of late, and you can imagine, as someone who teaches a women's voices elective, I have been just really making sure that I've been reading a ton of women authors, and I've been catching up on a lot of theory, and that to me is probably the most interesting thing right now. But as far as a single book, nah. It's too hard of a question,
Yeah.
Is there maybe not personally, but maybe like a favorite book to teach? I know that's also maybe very hard because you taught a lot of books, but is there one book that maybe you try to teach every year? Maybe you have like a changing rotation, but there's one book that's always there that you want your students to learn about?
I don't teach sophomores. I haven't done for a long time, but one of my favorite books to teach was Crime and Punishment, just because it's such an incredible book. You really get carried away with just how Dostoevsky wrote and the command over the language that he had, but then also the emotions that you feel as you're reading it. But to be honest, I like a lot of the books that I teach. I taught Gone Girl.
Oh yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
Gone Girl was really cool.
I thought that was a really, really great experience, just to jump into something completely new and figure it out. I'd never taught that book before, and it was very cool to read that alongside my students and to find lessons that worked. Part of that is part of the fun and part of the challenge. I'm reading Kite Runner with my freshmen right now, and I hate that book, but they love it. And so,
wait, why hate Kite Runner? Why,
If anyone was read Kite Runner before we...
should I announce spoiler alerts?
I mean, I've read it.
All right, spoiler
I
alert.
haven't read it,
You
but
haven't finished reading
now that
it.
you said you didn't like it, I won't read it.
No, it's a wonderful book, and it's really good. I would call it beach reading.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It has a lot of good themes, and I think it's a great book for freshmen because they enjoy it, and student interest really is what drives me. So if their interest is there, then I can talk about it. But it's a book about a young man who witnesses his friend get sexually assaulted, and he does nothing. And he carries this guilt around with him for his entire life. Towards the end of the book, he has this opportunity to redeem himself and to absolve himself of his sin. And it just turns into this weird action movie. And it feels abrupt, and it doesn't feel natural. And I imagine it's a great movie because of the way that it's written, but the storytelling is a little confusing, and I didn't necessarily appreciate that kind of turn.
So I'm guessing, based off our conversation now, what do you think is the most important feature of a novel, I guess?
What I look for when it comes to teaching a book is how is this going to speak to my students? How is it going to speak to them on an emotional level? And if it can engage them on an emotional level, I think that's particularly powerful. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be about their experience. It has to be, how can I make that connection there? How can I get them to realize that no matter what the story is about, that literature is just a reflection of our own lives? So that's huge. But as I was just mentioning too, like, student interest is very important. Mm-hmm. If I can get a book and I can say, hey, this is a book about a man who might have murdered his wife.
Yeah.
That's it. Students have bought in. I'm good. Any taboo subjects I like to bring up in the classroom because I know that it's going to drive interest.
Yeah. What do you think of, like, an English class? Like, do you think it should be more current or more based in the past, like more based in essentials? Because
That's a good question.
There are two types of English teachers that I've experienced. There is the teachers who go, well, we're reading American literature, so we got to work through the years, and you start way back and you make your way forward. And in my personal experience, it's like, I don't really engage with the books from the 1800s, sure. Right? But then sometimes there are other teachers who like to teach more current books with more impacts in today. And like, for me, I find that more interesting, like, now. You know what I mean? So
Very
it's
much
like, so it's like, what types, like, do you think literature has to be based on, like, the essentials, like, from 1800s, like your Charles Dickens and such, or do you think we should be more focused on, like, now?
You know, just to be a little bit controversial, but the way that the English curriculum works here is not necessarily how I would do it if I had control. You know, I mentioned earlier I don't teach sophomores, and a lot of that is because, number one, I don't feel comfortable teaching the classics. My first time reading the Odyssey was here, so that doesn't put me at an advantage, but I feel like, outside of AP classes, of course, I feel like my job is to get students interested in literature to the point where they want to write about it. And unfortunately, there is this stigma that comes with older texts that just doesn't speak to me, this doesn't connect in any kind of way. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of teachers that will teach the Scarlet Letter, and you can totally apply that to modern times. You know, you know, and I know that she works with an author that I really love, and I've read most of his books, John Ronson, and he wrote this book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And that's essentially all that the Scarlet Letter is about.
Class, yeah,
absolutely. And you know, you can make it modern, but if I can't find that entry point, I don't want to teach it, because I know what you're saying. It has to feel relevant, because and the burden of making it feel relevant should come on the teacher, because if you're the student, how do I know you're going to put in that effort to try to make it relevant on your own? What direction do you have? Like, it's in my court.
Yeah. Talking about writing, I've noticed as a student in your class, you pay attention to writing a lot more than maybe certain themes. I mean, you still talk about themes a lot, but I remember one of the first things you said was you deeply love writing. And I was just wondering, as a teacher, what do you look for in students writing from a book, and and what kind of tips or like certain skills do you think we can improve on through your experience at Stuyvesant?
I'm a big fan of art, which sounds kind of silly to say, but you know, a couple hours in a museum is just so much fun to me. And what makes it even better is when you go with someone and you stop at a painting and you have a conversation about it and what you see in that painting, or what's coming out to you, or what details are standing out to you. The artist is creating something and putting it out into the world, and then giving the audience the opportunity to interpret what that is. And thus, we can talk about it, we can have those kinds of conversations. You might wonder what it's like to teach a book year in, over and over and over again, but it's actually a fun experience, because it's like a movie that's just so good and so layered. Every time you revisit it, there's just new things that you can see, and students help me understand things about books that I haven't seen before or considered before, because of the limitations of my perspective. And when I think about good writing, that's what I'm looking for. I want to know, what do you see in the text? What do you see in the text from a creative capacity that maybe I hadn't thought of before, or, taking a risk. Here's a word, here's a phrase that stood out to me, and it makes me think of X, Y, or Z. I want to talk about it because it's leading me to a particular conclusion. So much of the writing that I get is oftentimes just regurgitation, and that's not really saying much. I can read Spark Notes too. You really want to see students take a risk. And that all goes back to making sure that you have students that feel comfortable taking those risks. Writing is a hard process. A lot of people think that it's just a skill that you have or you don't, and so there's this unwillingness to work on it. I have a student who get a B- on a paper, and then the next paper, their grade is only a little higher, and there's frustration over why am I not improving dramatically? And it's hard as a teacher to tell someone, hey, like, this is a skill that you have to hone over years.
It's like lifting weights, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't one day pick up a 5-pound weight, and then the next session you pick up a 20-pound weight.
Absolutely.
That's not
Like
how it works.
today actually, I was reading my final paper for English last year, and when I was writing that paper, I was like, oh my God, I'm such a good writer. This is such a good idea. I really like what I did, and I got a good grade on it. But as I read it now, it's like, oh my God, what was I doing? Like, there were so many different ways I could have took, like, the way I could have, like, explained my argument, or if it's a creative piece, certain things that I could have done differently, And, like you said, it is something that you hone in, and as you read more books, your perspective changes on how you want to write, how you want to tell a story.
You're never going to write anything that's perfect. You're always going to go back to it, and you're always going to try to think, how could I have said it differently? And a lot of us focus on that. We tend to self-criticize and be really hard on ourselves in that degree. But I think what's also important to realize is just saying something and putting it on paper and then putting it out into the world is a brave act. And it's important to acknowledge that you are doing something where you are being vulnerable in a way that is so much more than a math problem. And that's something to be admired.
So when you grade papers, do you keep, because you've gotten a degree, a bachelor's and a master's degree in English. So do you keep in mind that, I guess, we're 9th graders and 11th graders, and like our writing is not really like, I don't know, excellent. It's not great. Yeah, I'm guessing.
Like, or maybe I could say it in this way. Do you expect, on top of that, do you expect more from your 11th graders than from your 9th graders?
Yeah. Do you see like development by age?
It's a very different relationship because I work with my freshmen for the entire year. Mm-hmm. And I like that because I get to see them through and really focus on what it is that I want to focus on. A lot of times what I'll do is the first assignment that I give is ungraded, and I use that as a baseline. Mm-hmm. Here's where you're at. Are you going to improve past that? And so then papers after that, I can then measure based on, are you moving in a positive direction? Are you taking some of the feedback of what we're doing in the class? Are you giving me what I'm asking for in this particular assignment? And so that becomes that kind of measurement. This is going to be a frustrating answer, but it becomes innate after a while. I actually had a student teacher in the fall, and it was a great experience, but it was also a very frustrating experience because I had to explain my practices to someone else. And these are things that I internalize. This is muscle memory.
It's teaching.
And but like, how do you translate muscle memory into cohesive words and sentences? And it was hard to do, but I'm thankful that I had it because at least I could then rationalize what I was doing. But I try to make grading essentially finding where the student is at and then measuring them against themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are there, over all the years, right? Like, I imagine a bunch of the papers that you get this year will be very similar to a bunch of the papers that you'll get next year, right? Do you get that experience where, like, the papers that you get from one year are kind of similar to the ones from last year? Like, everyone just sort of thinks the same way? Or is it like every year it's like a whole new batch?
Well, it's interesting because different teachers will try different assignments, and I'm always really retooling and trying different things. But one thing that I try to do with assignments is that I try to incorporate not just the analysis, but then also some sort of personal narrative as well. And in that, you get to learn more about the students, you get to learn more about their personal stories, and so that kind of creates a new feature to it. But there are assignments sometimes where I'll ask myself, is this something I want to read? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is no, then I might change the assignment around and I might make it a little bit more interesting. You know, everyone reads The Great Gatsby, and at the beginning of the first chapter, Gatsby's reaching his arms out to this green light. And what does the green light represent? It's the most boring paper ever written, and everyone writes about it. And I don't ever want to read that paper, so I don't assign it.
I think someone in Bronx Science told me about them writing about the green light in A Great Gatsby.
Are there any specific papers that stand out to you over your last 8 years?
I had a student who, her name was Bonnie, and I had her for 3 semesters, really quiet student, but came out of her shell more and more. And we had just finished Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, which is a graphic novel about a queer woman's experience coming to terms with understanding her father's suicide. And Bonnie created her own miniature graphic novel. She was an amazing artist, but produced this piece of work, this art. And through the help of, I think it was Bernstein, entered into a contest, and she won a $10,000 scholarship for the art that she had created.
Wow.
And I didn't ask her to do the assignment. I didn't ask her to do the work. She just kind of did it on her own because she wanted to create that. But the idea that because I brought that book into the classroom, that just led to this series of events where she then went on and created that. It was just so cool and amazing. And it's reminding me that I want to think about how to make assignments where students have the opportunity to express themselves in that kind of way, because it's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he did speak about like art, and you just brought up graphic novels. Like I know you shouldn't really admit this to an English teacher, but I did read The Kite Runner in graphic novel before I read the book of it. And like, I mean, what is your opinion on like just the place of art and graphic novels in today's literature?
I read a ton of comics and graphic novels, so I'm all about it.
Yeah, like while I was in your class, I was reading Watchmen on the side.
Yeah, I love Watchmen.
And they're making a new show of it on HBO.
I saw. Yeah,
Very
yeah.
much looking forward to it. I thought the movie was good. I know it's getting off topic, but
It's okay.
the movie was okay. But I'm looking forward to the new one.
No, I enjoyed it. It's, it depends because you're going to get different qualities, and there are graphic novels that you can read that are just fun and have really cool, great stories and have awesome art. And then there are graphic novels which have a considerable amount of depth to them. And it's not just about the story that they're trying to tell, but it's the idea of why did I choose this medium specifically as opposed to others?
Okay.
Aaron, this is a cool voice effect that you're
So,
doing.
Is this picking up on the mic?
Oh, yeah.
Probably. Yeah. Okay. So
Charlie Brown adult voice.
trying to preface this to everybody. If you didn't know, we're recording this in Stuyvesant.
Yeah,
And they
in
just put
Stuyvesant.
an announcement out. And if you heard some people outside previously, those are people outside making a lot of noise.
Yeah.
So
We'll try and going forward. Yeah, we're working on it. Yeah.
I'm not sure we can do much about it.
Yeah. So
All right. So going to the opposite end of the spectrum.
Sure.
What was your strangest experience in Stuyvesant? Like, what was, I guess, this experience that most surprised you as a person?
deep question.
No, and it's
It can
powerful.
just be a weird thing.
Yeah.
Trying to think. Today's an interesting day that we're recording because I heard some sirens outside earlier. And I'm upstairs in the 6th floor break room where the English teachers hang out. And I peek out the window, and there's got to be 15 police vans outside.
Today?
Yeah.
Do you guys know what that's about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't know if I want to talk about it.
Okay, wait. Tell me later.
Post.
No, and you can talk about it later, but it just reminded me of being in school after the Halloween attack And I know that
Yeah.
that's not necessarily maybe the answer you're looking for, but
That's fine.
it was just very surreal. It's part of the experience of being here and working here is you're at a school that has at least citywide, if not sometimes national attention. And
Yeah.
to see where you work in national news was just very strange and surreal.
Yeah, I got
As a student, that was really weird.
before
imagine.
before my mother called me. My cousins from Maryland did because they just look on the news and. My father, so proud of his son being at Stuyvesant and whatnot. He drove them by the school when they came to visit New York, and about 3 or 4 months later, they just look in the news and they see my school.
Yeah.
So they just shoot me a call, and this is before I know what's going on. So that's how I learned about it.
Oh yeah, it's crazy because
The Halloween attacks were
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because when I got home, my parents weren't the only ones asking about me. My relatives, if most people didn't know, I'm from Burma, which is all the way across the world. But even they were asking about me because they heard about it on Facebook. They saw it on Facebook. They're like, "Oh, my daughter's son goes there. My grandson goes there."
That's what most of
And
them
it's just-
call them.
Yeah, my grandson
daughter's
goes
son.
there, and then they really reached out, and I was like, wow, this is so
Yeah.
strange because this is my school really in like the spotlight of the world at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's funny because me and Cheyenne were in the same classroom at that
Yeah.
moment, and we were kind of really not paying attention. We just saw a bunch of kids run into our classroom, and they
It took
were like,
hours for
Yeah.
it to really
Oh my God.
internalize.
Were
'cause
you guys in that classroom for a couple hours?
yeah, we
Oh,
had
yeah.
computers.
After like
and
9-ish.
We mine was bad because I was on the 4th floor. We didn't get an angle on it, but we were close by, like where we could see the police. We were in that room when did we leave? At like 8.
it was a long time.
Yeah.
One of-
I think the thing that made it real was when like the police detectives, not like the street cops, but like the suit tie kind of like, big badge came in. Yeah. When they came in and talked to us, that's when it's like, oh, this isn't just like
They
a
went to
small
every
thing.
room, right?
You know what did it for me? When John remembers this, we were in the computer lab, and we would just be refreshing, like just looking up Stuyvesant, and the
Yeah.
death count, and the injured
Oh,
count
yeah,
just
it
kept
went
going
Oh my
up
God.
Yeah.
and up,
Yeah.
and you just had to sit there going, that happened right out there.
And you're like, I just hope no one I know is in that position
God,
right
yeah.
now. Yeah. Or like no kid
yeah,
from
some
Stuyvesant.
of our friends were like right there.
Yeah. I had a couple friends that were walking to football practice and they saw like
Yeah.
the thing happen. It was just kind of.
It's interesting because on a daily basis, what are we thinking about? The class that I'm going to teach, you guys are thinking about a test. It pales in comparison to matters of life and death, and there's a sense of security that we have here, and that just shattered that, and that was weird. But it was also very weird as to how quickly the students bounced back from it.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like.
there was it was just so much support going on for the
Yeah.
next few days.
Yeah.
But like going to school for the next couple of days was weird.
Yeah, we had to walk around.
We had to
right?
walk around, and it
yeah.
felt like
At the detour.
felt like a camp.
And it was like a weird cloudy day.
Yeah,
Like
Oh, yeah.
extremely
moody,
bleak.
Yeah. And all you could think about is just what happened yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just insane.
Yeah, I still remember that extremely vividly.
There are like some moments that I feel like are like just watershed moments, and like I feel like for Sty, one of them, the last comparable one would be like 9/11, and like even though I know you weren't there at Sty for that, but like I can only imagine what like faculty have been through, because there are faculty who have been here for both, and
For everything, yeah.
you have to wonder like to go through it twice and still just come back with the same amount of passion is admirable.
It's funny, that day, I was really just looking out for students and trying to make sure that everyone was okay and helping them leave the building and things like that. But yeah, when I got home, I mean, I haven't had panic attacks for a long time, but I nearly had one because I wasn't thinking about myself and how I felt about what was going on. But, you call people, you talk to them, you talk it out, and you're not normalizing it, but you find a place for it. Yeah.
That was a hard topic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So maybe.
Real curveball there.
Yeah, to go
Yeah.
throw a bit of curveball. in your class, you play a lot of music.
I do.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask about that.
And a lot of it is good, but sometimes, I'm not going to lie, it's some weird European disco music.
Considering that I'm
Like,
still
we're
in your
reading-
class, I want you to know that it's the best
Like-
music I've ever heard.
Okay,
Never heard
yeah.
anything
Oh,
better.
yeah, yeah.
I agree.
Travis Scott, who's that?
Like I would like try to secretly take out my phone to Shazam some songs.
I'm not
we
gonna lie,
did that,
I've
yeah.
done that multiple times.
It's funny.
Like, what is this? But like,
You should drop
Yeah.
your
So
playlist.
where did you
Yeah,
always
yeah.
did you always plan on doing that? And like, where's your music taste come from?
So I actually do have a Spotify playlist right now that is public. My seniors asked for it, so I made it public for them.
Shout it out.
Yeah, shout it out.
This is the best place to plug it.
I mean,
Yeah.
it says my name. I don't know how to.
If
how to
anyone's
plug
this
it.
deep
name?
into
Oh,
our
okay.
podcast and is still listening, thank you very much.
Very creative playlist name. It's called Class.
Ooh.
Can
So
there be more than
abstract.
one?
Yeah, right.
Eric Ferencz.
A lot of
Class.
it depends on different things. I mean, lately I've been playing a lot of what's called Tropicalia, which is Brazilian music, and I just like it. It sounds like a nice, warm, sunny day, and so I've been playing some of that.
What's the weirdest music phase you've been through?
I mean, I was very much into, I would say, like hardcore punk when I was in high school. One thing I don't know if you realize or anything, but being alive during the transition from compact discs to an iPod was monumental. The idea that you could store days of music on a device just changed the game completely. And friends, we would go and we'd share CDs and just build up our collections. And so I was really trying to get into as much different kind of music as possible.
Do you miss them?
CDs?
Like CDs, going to the record store?
No, I'm not a store person. Like, I don't enjoy going into stores and shopping for things. I'd rather just get it online. But I understand the
Yeah.
nostalgia that's there. But
Because I hear a lot about that. Like,
I'm a video game guy,
Yeah.
and I buy a lot of. I used to buy a lot before. You could buy stuff on like digital, like online.
yeah,
I used to really get the disc from like GameStop or
Yeah.
Target, I guess. And
Like-
it's really nice to just have the hard copy.
Yeah. Same. Like I still go to GameStop because I want the case.
well, and there's that excitement of like browsing and then buying and taking it home, and I just don't subscribe to
Yeah.
that at all. I love like subscription stuff that I can just. I have my Spotify and get everything I want
Yeah.
at my fingertips.
It's really subjective.
You know,
How was the LimeWire days?
LimeWire, Kazaa. Remember when Napster first came out? Like they had a concert in New York City, and me and my friends went there.
the FBI is actually listening.
No.
If you really, really weird music, I love this band from the 1960s from Germany called Kraftwerk. They essentially invented dance music, and to hear the stuff that they produced in that time period, it just feels so ahead of the game and so cool. But I'm fortunate in that I have a lot of friends who are music nerds, and so they really get me into whatever it is that they're listening to. But the real thing that I appreciate about having music in my classroom is, and a lot of people don't realize this.
They look like drones.
Yeah, no, they look like robots. They act like robots.
700,000 monthly listeners. It's pretty good.
Oh,
Mr. Ferencz is
I mean,
one of
they're
them.
like historical, aren't they?
well, when you're a teacher, you want to have timed activities. So I actually will play songs based on how long that they are.
Oh.
And I use that when I know the song is over, it's time to end the activity.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of I want to keep my students interested, I want to keep them in a nice chill environment, but also it's just me kind of maintaining control over the classroom with this like invisible hand. I also tend not to play music with lyrics
Yeah.
when students are writing, because I'm the kind of person that I can't listen to music when I'm writing. I can't listen to music with vocals
It's the same with me.
because then I'll write the words down as I'm hearing them. So
Yeah. Or the words will bleed into your thoughts.
yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we gonna wrap?
You wanted to ask
I mean,
one more question,
yeah.
right?
Before coming to Sty, you said that you know how you said that you don't really know what the next step is, right? Before you came to Sty, you gave an interview to The Spectator where you said you would be open to work at a university one day down the line. Would you, and thinking about like today, would you like skip out on Sty and then go to a university?
So currently my plans are not to do that because for a lot of reasons, but also just because financially it makes no sense. If I were to, let's say, go the next level and become a doctor of English, it would be very hard for me to secure a university position. And so what happens next? Do I come back here? And then I'm a doctor and I have all the fees of tuition and I'm getting paid the same exact salary.
So is this your end game?
This is where the career ends?
What I've thought about is when I'm done teaching, when I retire, because I can technically retire in 20 years at 55.
Yeah.
So I think then if I'm in a financially stable situation, then I would go back to college and maybe get a doctorate. I don't know if I want to teach at a university. I think that it's something for incredibly hardworking, talented people, and I don't know if I could cut it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's like the NBA. You know, there's only so many spots at universities for a person who teaches English.
So if you're planning on getting the doctorate, like only very late in your life, is that kind of just going to be like a memorabilia or just like
Just to do it.
Just to do it. Okay.
I have a younger brother who is currently on a doctor track, and it's just competition.
You just gotta edge him out.
Yeah.
I can't, like, it's frustrating to me that he's going to reach that
If you
milestone.
could though, if say logistically all of it works out, and say there's one spot available at your dream school, where would you go, like to teach?
You know, it's interesting because as a lot of people are thinking about what colleges to attend and stuff like that, every college has such a wonderful amount of resources and opportunities for teachers. Like, you know, I'd be fine, but maybe somewhere nice where the weather is nice, maybe Santa Cruz or
That's
something.
fair.
You know?
That's fair. I can take that.
All right. Aaron, do you want to ask the last question? Another question, or should we just end it off here?
I think it's good.
All
We've
right.
been here for
For
an
like-
hour. How long has it been now?
Wow, we've been here.
An
Okay,
hour.
so
The chances
All
that
right,
people are even
so-
this far back.
thank you
So low.
everyone for listening to our podcast.
Yes.
And if you stuck around for this long, that's amazing. And
Yeah. And if you have, please email us about any comments about the podcast.
email us at stuyvesantpodcast@gmail.com. And you can check this out on, as we said before, YouTube, Spotify,
SoundCloud.
SoundCloud, our
and
website.
Our website.
It'll mostly be on Facebook, but
And yeah.
please send us any comments, anything you liked, anything you disliked.
Also, Mr. Ferencz,
yes.
if you want to plug anything, this is your chance. You're in the spotlight now.
I appreciate that. I have no upcoming gigs to plug.
Maybe
Okay.
plug your women's voices class.
Yeah,
Would you want to do that?
I teach a senior elective called Women's Voices where we only read works written by women, but we also spend a lot of time talking about a great deal of women's issues. You know, anything that you might have missed from other classes that isn't part of the curriculum, we try to cover. We try to make sure that we have some really strong and healthy, empowering discussions about what it means to be a woman in the world today and how to be an ally to women in the world today.
All right.
All right. So
Yeah.
that was great. And thank you for, again, thank you for joining our podcast. And that's it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Friends. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Bye.